Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Okay, at this point we usually go around and say our names. I'm Bob.
Larry. Mark. Douglas. Ken. Bill. Larry.
CJ.
Carly.
George.
Uben. Jay. Carl.
Brad.
Kay.
Sam.
Carl.
Jim.
Darren. Jack.
Peter.
Jim.
Ken. Hi.
Nabu. Stephen. Michael. Richard. Paul.
Now the chairs.
Greg.
Mike.
Jim. David.
Dennis.
Lisa.
Paul. Jim.
Anna.
John. Buzz.
Harley.
Ray.
Don.
Larry.
Okay, I'm sorry about the lack of chairs.
Richard.
Darwin.
Is everybody back? And Susan Moon has been a Zen student since 1976, practicing with Mel Weitzman at the Berkeley Zen Center. She now practices primarily with the Everyday Zen Sangha, and in August of this year, last year, 2005, she received lay entrustment from Zoketsu Norman Fischer. She's the editor of Turning Wheel, which is the quarterly magazine of the Buddhist Peace Fellowship, and she's author of The Life and Letters of Tofu Roshi, and editor-author of Not Turning Away, The Practice of Engaged Buddhism. She recently completed a solitary retreat and wants to explore the theme that even when you are alone, you are not turning your back on the rest of the world. She is interested in what you bring back when you return from a retreat, and how the practice of solitude can benefit activism in the world through socially engaged Buddhism. Her topic will be practicing alone with everyone.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
It's really nice to be here. I think this is the only time I've ever been the only woman in a room with so many men. It's very bracing. Wonderful. Thank you for inviting me, even though I'm not a gay man. At least not on the surface. Inside me, I am a gay man. Well, I find when I give Dharma talks, I talk about my own experience in my own life, not because it's particularly important, but because I think all of us, as we practice the Dharma, are exploring what it means to be born a human being and how to fully express that. And for me, the only human being I really know what it's like to be born as is myself. And so I use myself as an example in the hope that what I experience will be something that others share and can connect with. And I do want to talk today about the 1-month solitary retreat that I made this past fall, which was really an extraordinary experience for me, and it was very much a dharmic practice. I spent a month alone, completely alone, in a cabin in Mendocino County, north of the town of Willits. It's a small, sort of hippie hand-built cabin that I own. It's on a very small piece of land, which I own with 3 other families, and there are 3 little rustic cabins there that were already built when we bought the land, and so I've been going up there for 25 years or so, and just 25 years. But I never have particularly liked going there alone because it's so isolated, and it's a great place to be with a friend or a lover or family. But a theme in my life has been that I'm afraid of loneliness, and that's something I've struggled with a lot. And through my Zen practice, I've really gradually come to understand that I am not alone and I am not separate, and that it is the belief in the separate self that is one of the greatest causes of suffering. But that's easy to say, and I thought, well, I feel ready to really try to face myself and see what it's like to be alone and see who's there when there's nobody there but me. So this cabin is 2 miles up a steep dirt road on a ridge, and there's no electricity, there's no phone, there's no cell phone access. There's a neighbor half a mile up the dirt road and another neighbor a mile down the dirt road, both of whom live there but go to work in the town of Willits every day. So it's very, very isolated. There was no way for me to get in touch with anybody, and that was my intention, to really not speak to anybody or see anybody for a whole month. And if you stop to think about it, how often do you even go for a day without seeing or speaking to another person? It practically never happens. So this was a pretty intense ambition I had. And I set up the experience quite carefully. I arranged with the neighbor up the road to drop off some fresh produce twice during the month. But mostly I ate rice and beans and things like that. And I also arranged with Norman Fischer, my Dharma teacher, to have once a week, which ended up being 3 times, telephone interviews, conversations. And I drove down the road to a highway rest stop down on the paved road, about 20-minute drive from the cabin, to call Norman. And that was going to be the only time I would leave the cabin. So I was kind of getting ready in my mind to go for a long time before I even went by making these plans. And some people in my life couldn't understand why I wanted to do this. My mother said, "What would you want to do that for?" And I wasn't going to be calling her up twice a week as I usually do, and she had to allow me to go. And one of my sons said, "Well, I think if you're up there, you should be getting to know the neighbors. Why would you just not want to talk to anybody?" So it's kind of goes against the grain for people to do this sort of thing. And in Zen practice, we don't really have a tradition of solitary retreat, at least not in Japanese Zen practice, the tradition that I'm in. I guess in Tibetan Buddhism, there is a tradition of solitary retreat, but for me, this was kind of my own devising, this retreat. And Norman was very supportive. He thought it was a good idea, too. So I wanted to read you my sort of text for the day, in a sense, which is just a short quote from Eihei Dogen, a Zen master from the 1200s, who you may know of. And this is a kind of much quoted little piece from the Genjo Koan by Dogen. He says, "To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to become one with the myriad things. When you become one with the myriad things, your body and mind, as well as the bodies and minds of others, drop away. No trace of enlightenment remains, and this no trace continues endlessly." So I was hoping maybe I'd forget the self, and my body and mind would drop away, and so would the body and mind of everybody else. And it sort of happened in different ways. So I wanted to tell you a little more specifically what it was really like. I think, that, well, to say a little bit more about the whole thing of being alone, I have this feeling, or I've had this feeling, that I'm very gregarious, and I love people, and I love my friends and family and community, but I've spent a lot of my life making sure that a lot of people love me all the time, and to just kind of make sure I really am there. And I just decided, enough already. There's plenty of love. Yes, it's okay. It's okay. Now, what if there isn't anybody there? What if somebody doesn't love you for 3 seconds? You still have to be okay. So I just really wanted to know that I was all right without anybody else. And it's not just being loved that was the problem. It's also a feeling that if there isn't another person there kind of reflecting me back to myself, it's harder to know that I actually exist. And some of you might know this kind of existential feeling of lack, that, how do you really know you're alive and you're a person if you're all alone and there's nobody else there to say, yeah, I heard what you said. So this was kind of the core question that I had. So see, is there somebody there? When there's nobody there but me, is there somebody there? So I went up there, and I went up with one of my sons and a friend of mine who has one of the other cabins. She was there with 2 of her grandchildren, and my son was up there with me for the weekend. And then my friend and her grandchildren and my son, we had dinner together, and then they waved goodbye and drove down the road and left me there. And I cried that afternoon when they drove down the road. I thought, wow, I'm here all alone for all time. But I was also really excited and really up for it. And I also had with me my sister's dog, who she had loaned me for the retreat, a really nice dog named Satchmo, who's a big sort of shepherd mutt mix who looks kind of like a deer. And he's very, very tender, sensitive dog who was very devoted to me and was really good company. And also, I kind of wanted him because there's been a bear prowling around a lot up there and broken into my cabin several times in the last year or so and trashed all the food and everything, and various visitors have encountered this bear going to the outhouse in the middle of the night and things. So I was a little scared of the bear, even though it's not the kind of bear that eats people. But I thought that Satchmo would make me feel braver. So it was nice to have the dog, and it was nice in ways that I hadn't even anticipated, because I got to know the kind of company that an animal can be, and the kind of communication that went on between us was amazing to me. It was constant, and especially since there wasn't anybody else there but the 2 of us, and we were next to each other. He just stuck pretty much close by me the whole time. I was actually relating to another being just about the whole time. Except what was good was that I didn't have him the last week of my retreat. And as it happened, I left for 36 hours to go to a memorial service of somebody very close to me in Chicago. So it was kind of like this strange time warp that I'm not really going to get into, because basically it's as if it didn't even happen, except that I drove to Oakland Airport, got on a plane to Chicago, went to the memorial service, came back to Oakland Airport, and drove back to the cabin. And I also left the dog with my sister in Berkeley at that time. So I had the experience of 3 weeks with the company of the dog and the last week without the dog, and it was hugely different. And I hadn't anticipated that, but it was good that I had the dog at the beginning when I was kind of gearing up and getting braver, because I don't think I would have been ready to be there alone without the dog at the beginning in a way. And And when I came back from this memorial service, I had a kind of complete collapse the first night. I got back up to the cabin and just completely fell apart with loneliness, because I had just been with really close friends and family and celebrating the life of this wonderful person who had died, and I had had a sort of intense dose of really intimate family love and friendship, and then there I was all of a sudden by myself again and without even the dog, and suddenly my life seemed, I couldn't understand what I was doing there, and it was all the worst tapes about loneliness kind of got charged up again. And then they subsided, and by the end of that last week, I was feeling wonderful. But I want to tell you some more specifics about how my time was there. I didn't take a watch. This was another thing I really wanted to explore, because my life ordinarily is ruled so much by schedules and appointments and my calendar, and am I on time, am I late, I have to rush from one thing to the next. And I wanted to really have the experience of getting up when I woke up, going to bed when I went to bed, eating when I was hungry, not knowing what time it was, not caring what time it was, not saying to myself, I'm going to sit here and write. One of my main purposes was also to write. But to not say, I'll sit here for another 20 minutes and then I'll let myself get up and have a cup of tea. Just completely trying to be in the present moment as much as possible. And it really, really helped not to have the watch. It changed my feeling about time. So, anyway, I had a schedule, but my schedule wasn't according to the clock. It was just kind of an order of activities that I tended to do in the day. And I didn't want to do a sort of heavy-duty sesshin meditating all day long. I wanted to really explore who I was and write and have pleasurable experiences. Not that meditation isn't pleasurable, but I didn't want to just do that. So I would get up, and then the first thing I did was walk the dog, who was ready to go the minute I woke up. And then after we had a really good walk, and then I'd meditate for a while, and I don't know exactly how long I meditated for, but I had some sticks of incense, so I meditated for the length of the stick of incense. And I had a nice little meditation corner I made, and then I had breakfast, and then I wrote all morning, and then when it seemed like it was lunchtime, I had lunch, and then in the afternoons I did some kind of work project or other. I found myself just completely excited about doing things physically with my body, and building bookcases and clearing trails and stacking firewood and sawing boards and fixing benches, and I just was amazed. I had a wonderful time doing that, and every afternoon I would do some kind of work project like that. And then I would have some tea in the afternoon, and then I would take the dog for another walk, and then I would come back and sit. The cabin has a really nice porch, sort of deck. It's like the prow of a ship. It looks out over this valley and across to mountains on the other side. And so I'd sit on this porch in the afternoon, and the weather was just perfect in September. It was warm in the day, but not too hot, and it was cool at night, but not cold. And so I'd sit on the porch and read until it got too dark to see, and then I would go inside and meditate again. And then I had supper. And then after supper was the sort of time when I didn't really know what to do, because sometimes I read, sometimes I listened to some music I'd brought on CDs, or I crocheted, or I tried to teach myself the ukulele, which I had all these little projects lined up. But actually, when you're in a cabin with kerosene lanterns, it's a little... Kerosene lanterns just don't quite have the oomph to get your energy up to do something very challenging, and I kind of faded a lot in the evenings. Plus, it was dark, and the strange sounds were going on, scratching the roof and so on. So I just kind of tended to go to bed fairly early, I think. So that was kind of the picture of my day. And one of the main things that I was doing was really taking care of myself. I was feeding myself. I was cutting the firewood to make sure I had a wood fire when it was cold. I had to fix the water line one time when there was this leak in the water line. I was so proud of myself that I figured out how to do it. And cooking 3 meals a day for myself, because since I was eating the kind of food that you have to prepare, really. I didn't have quick foods there. So, when I would make a delicious potato salad for myself, I figured, there must be somebody here. Otherwise, why would I be making all this potato salad for her? And it was just really convinced me, yeah, I'm a person too. I need to be warm. I need to get water. And I'm used to doing that for my children or my housemates or other people around me. But to just do it for yourself is kind of a wonderful experience. It's a real privilege to just take care of yourself as if you are a worthy person who deserves to be taken care of. And doing that for a whole month really kind of convinced me. So I wanted to give you sort of 3 pictures of little snapshots of different experiences there. And one is of the sort of hardest time, which is I found that twilight, I got really sad. And this has been true for me ever since I was a small child. There's something about the end of the day and that in-between time when it's not day, it's not night. What is it? The day is dying. It just seems so unbearably sad. And up there, alone, and it was so beautiful, it just really seemed unbearable. And I would get so lonely. I had what I would call a sort of twilight sickness that came over me. And so I would just sob and why am I here? What is this? And it was really kind of out of control and strange, like a visitation or something. And sometimes it didn't always happen, but there was always some taste of grief or something at the end of the day. And I wanted to read you a little piece I wrote from a little prose piece I wrote about that. Last night, when the sun set, the twilight sickness came. There was no one with me in the sad time between light and dark. The day was on its deathbed. I watched it lie down on the brown hills. The insects sang out, katydids, crickets, farewell day, hello night. I tried to catch the moment when they started their klezmer song, but I missed it. I always do. When I first hear them, they're already singing, like the first star, always already shining. I knew it was not to make me sad that the insects sawed at their legs, but so it seemed. I had no one to be at my side at the end of the day, as they say. I could have tried to distract myself from the twilight sickness, could have cranked up my wind-up radio and listened to K-Mud in Garberville, where old hippies are always bashing bush and so providing a certain amount of company. But the wind-up radio runs down, and in the sudden wordless pause before I crank it up again, I hear the crickets, and the demon named All Alone breathes down my neck, making the hairs stand up. So I sat down on my round black cushion to face the twilight. I vowed to sit there until it was night. I watched the day give up the ghost. Where the sky met the line of the Yalaboli Mountains, I saw a color with no name between green and pink. I slipped down in the loss of light, and my own life seemed to fade with the day. All I loved was gone, all I'd done was wrong. The dark ate the trees, leaf by leaf. And still I sat there, staring down my mind. After all, I'd come by choice to be alone on Shimon's Ridge, like a monk in a Chinese scroll. What is it? I shouted. What is it? At last, twilight was gone. I went down the steep stairs and lit the lamps and ate my rice and beans in a time that was called night. So that's kind of how it felt sometimes. But there was something about that I really did kind of stare down the demons, and I just kept sitting there. And as I said, what is it? What is it? It was nothing. And it was okay. And I began to feel that I was sitting in the lap of Buddha. I began more and more to understand that the universe was taking care of me. And that was partly because of being in nature like that. And you're really not alone in nature in the same way that you are when you get sort of disconnected from natural events. Or at least I don't feel that way. When the crickets are singing and the trees are whispering, and you can start to feel the vibrations of all the life that's passing through you too, especially when you've been still for so long. So I began to feel my real connection, and that I really was not a separate being at some level. And I talked with Norman also about this the day after one of my worst bouts. I had one of my phone conversations with Norman, and he was saying, encouraging me that this was a really good thing, that I was having this experience, and that it's natural, of course, to feel that it's a kind of primitive, basic human emotion to feel some sadness at the end of the day, maybe, and it's just to be in touch with nature that way, and to not add on all my own stuff about how my whole life has been a big mistake and everything, that I added on all this other stuff to it. And so that was also my practice as I was sitting in the twilight, was to, when I was asking what is it, to see that it wasn't really about thinking about the mistakes I'd made in my life. That wasn't where I was. I was sitting there in this beautiful place looking at some beautiful light that was fading on some beautiful mountains, and if I wanted to add on, my life has been a big mistake and I blew it in 1972 when I did X, Y, and Z, that was really too bad for me to have to do that and kind of rob myself of the experience that I was having right then. So I really saw quite clearly how much we seduce ourselves away from the lives we're in right now by having these thoughts and running these tapes on ourselves. I thought I'd read you a poem of Emily Dickinson's that kind of relates to this. And she's also speaking of the spirits or God or the angels or whatever who are present all the time with one. She says, "Alone I cannot be, for hosts do visit me, recordless company who baffle key. They have no robes nor names, no almanacs nor climes, but general homes like gnomes. Their coming may be known by couriers within. Their going is not, for they're never gone." So all these beings are with us all the time. Hosts. She calls them hosts. Well, so another picture that I want to give you was a completely different sort of little vignette. One afternoon, I'd been there for a while, and I was feeling really good and strong and enjoying myself a lot. And I was on this beautiful porch one afternoon doing some yoga, and these planes kept going overhead. And one of the things I love there is the silence, and I was just feeling so annoyed. Thinking, why are these planes going? They're really annoying. And then I kind of looked out and saw huge billows of smoke and realized that there was a forest fire and that they were forestry planes. And I couldn't tell where the fire was coming from, but from where I stood, and there are a lot of trees around there too, it looked like it could have been coming from the road, the little valley right at the bottom of our dirt road. And the smoke was just billowing up, and I got worried and anxious, and I thought, it could be that if the fire's down on the Covelo Road, it could just come tearing up this ridge and I'd be done for in a second. So I got the dog, and I thought we'd go drive down the road in the car and check it out. And Satchmo and I got into the car, and then I went to start the car, and it had a dead battery. And guess why it had a dead battery? Because I brought my laptop up there and I'd gotten this special little gizmo that you can recharge your laptop by plugging it into the car cigarette lighter. And I'd been doing that, and I had actually been starting up the car every couple of days to make sure that the battery was still good. But I hadn't started up the car for a couple of days, and I guess I'd gotten very cavalier about the whole thing. Anyway, so that was the moment when all of a sudden I had a dead battery. And then I did have a moment of a little bit of fear. I thought, if this fire is coming up this ridge and I can't get down there very fast, I could be down. I thought about the Oakland fire and the people who died in the Oakland hills, and my mind got going. And then I thought, well, my family and friends would be so annoyed with me if I burned to death because I had a dead battery. So I got the dog and we walked down the road. I figured I'll go get my neighbor to give me a jump start. And I walked down the road to the neighbor a mile down the road, halfway down, but he wasn't there. So I figured he was at work, and I knew the neighbor above me was at work, and I thought, I'm the only living person on Shimon's Ridge. So then we walked another mile down to the bottom of the dirt road, and by that time I could see that the fire was not coming up from our valley. It was on the other side of another ridge, so I was relieved about that. And then down at the bottom of the dirt road, there were some neighbors, and they were home, and so were the neighbors who hadn't been home 1 mile down the dirt road. And these people are, they're like old hippies who live up there, and they're very nice. And it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and they were sitting around drinking beer. This was on a weekday afternoon, and there were 2 families sitting there. And I said, what's happening with this fire? And they said, we went on the internet. It's over on 101. Don't worry about it. And if it was coming up, somebody would come and get you, so don't worry. And I said, well, I have a dead battery. And they said, we'll give you a ride. We'll give you a jump start. The one man there who lived in that house said he'd give me a jump start. And they said, sit down and have a glass of water. And I sat down, and I just sat there, and they chatted for about half an hour, and nobody did anything. And I didn't say, well, hurry up and give me a jump start. I wasn't in any hurry anyway, but I was very struck by how this would never happen in Berkeley. If you went to ask some people for a jump start, and they said, we'll give you a jump start, and then they would just sit down like they hadn't said it and go on drinking beer. It's just a different pace there. So I just waited and there were all these hummingbirds. There were about, 24 hummingbirds buzzing around by this whole row of hummingbird feeders that the woman had up, and they were wonderful. And I hadn't talked to anybody for like 2 weeks, so I was in some kind of altered state anyhow. And so it was very odd. I was just sitting there quite grateful that I was going to get a jump start and not at all anxious anymore because I wasn't going to be burned to death after all. And these people were nice and everything was fine. But I was also noticing how different this was from my usual state of mind. And then finally the guy said, okay, well, let's go. And he went and got his truck. And it was about at least half an hour I'd been sitting there. And then he drove me up the road and gave me a jump start. And then I parked the car in a place where it was on a hill facing down because it's a shift car, so I was going to be all right on that count. And also, from then on, every time I did charge up my laptop, I kept the engine running the whole time that I was charging it so that the battery wouldn't die. But the other problem was that my car's gas gauge is broken, and the only way I know how much gas I have is by using the trip odometer. But if I wasn't going anywhere, I didn't know if I had any gas. So then I had to also make one more trip out, and I got a can of gas in case I ran out of gas by charging my laptop. So then I felt like I had my technology together. But that whole experience was really telling in another way, which was that I had just been feeling so proud of myself for being this pioneer woman out in the woods, fixing the water line and so forth. And annoyed with the airplanes, and then suddenly everything flipped, and I realized that even there, alone on my solitary retreat, I was completely woven into the whole web of human society, and that I was so grateful that the forestry department had planes to put out forest fires, and I was so grateful that there were nice, friendly people down at the bottom of the road who were going to give me a jump start, and that actually my whole retreat was kind of resting on a foundation of human goodwill and human society, that in a way that I hadn't recognized, and it was really good to be reminded of that. So my third picture is of one of my sort of happiest moments, which was one morning when I took the dog for the walk, and Satchmo and I were walking back to the cabin, and we'd been for a long walk, and it was still fairly early in the morning, I think, and I looked up as we were coming back to my cabin, and there was the gibbous moon, the almost full moon, just floating in this bright blue sky right above some digger pines, and it was just suddenly the most amazing thing I'd ever seen, and I just burst into tears of joy at the sight of this white moon just giving herself or himself to the world up there. And the way it was kind of nibbled at the edges seemed particularly heartbreakingly wonderful. And, it's nothing that you can even describe a moment like that, really, because it was just that I was so overcome with gratitude for my life and for the ability to see and for the ability to breathe that air, and I just felt so held in that moment, and realized that everything that we experience is such a miracle. And I sort of, the next thing I looked down at Satchmo, and his tongue was lolling out, and I noticed for the first time he had these sort of black splotches on his pink tongue, that are part of his tongue, and that seemed amazing to me too. I mean, suddenly everything was just, and I wasn't on any kind of psychedelic drugs. And it was just, it was really, I knew that because of being so quiet for so long and opening myself, that I had made it possible. I was available for that kind of experience. So here's another poem. This is Hafiz. Only that illumined one who keeps seducing the formless into form had the charm to win my heart. Only a perfect one who is always laughing at the word two can make you know of love. So I love that part about laughing at the word two, because for someone who's afraid that they're all alone and there's not a second person there, you're not two, you're just one. And then that this perfect one is laughing at the word two. There's no such thing as two, really. We're all one, or something like that. So it seemed to me that one of the main effects of this retreat, to connect it a little bit with coming back into the world, was that I really became a person less in need of reassurance, less, just more available, because I definitely feel that it was quite transformative for me, and I actually believe that I'm okay at some level that I didn't quite know before. And so I don't need to be asking other people to tell me that I'm okay in quite the same way that I used to. I mean, I did it in a way that was fairly gracious, so that people didn't feel like they were always having to pat me on the head, but still, I knew that I needed that, and it distracted me. And it distracted me from really being able to become my full self, and to just have that kind of confidence that one is being held by the universe, and that gratitude for the miracle of human birth, I think, is something that we can find our way to in different ways. It's not everyone who can go on a 1-month solitary retreat, obviously, but for all of us, I think if we can find our way to that kind of confidence that we're worthy and Buddha, we're sitting in the lap of Buddha, then we're all ready at that point to just step up to the plate, listen to whatever somebody has to say, be available to work for peace in the world, do all the work and all the jobs that need to be done and all the connections that need to be made, and to offer ourselves so that our own happiness really is a gift to others. And you know from yourselves when you are with somebody who's happy that's a gift to you. So that I think was the main lesson for me. And I want to end with one more short poem, and then I want to have some discussion. So this is a poem from, it's from a book of Enlightenment Poems by Women, translated by Jane Hirschfield, and they're all through history. And I think this is a very old Japanese poet. Watching the moon at midnight, solitary, mid-sky, I knew myself completely, no part left out. So I would like to hear from you all any questions or comments about experiences you have or thoughts you have on becoming your full selves, or not being afraid to be alone, or how you've explored solitude, or anything like that. Yes?
Thank you. I could resonate completely with everything that you said, and these are all journeys that I'm enjoying myself. One of the things I'd like to share with you about your twilight sickness, it's interesting to hear that word, that term coined. I learned that there is a phenomenon about, and I learned this through working with senior citizens and friends who are physicians, that in convalescent homes and hospitals, people who are in ICU do tend to have this, as the sun goes down, this dropping in spirits. But it also, and not just a sadness, but also a disorientation, complete loss of sense of space and time, particularly for people who are isolated and alone, and they just don't have a sense, and they don't know their name, they don't know who you are, and it is a documented phenomenon. And I find it interesting. You were exploring that and learning to sit with, but now you know this is a phenomenon, a part of who we are. And for me, it kind of makes me look at how I view sunsets. And I've made it a point in my life, as often as possible, to embrace the sunset. And perhaps that's part of it, is you go up with the sun and then you come down and your spirits rest with it. I find that fascinating that you were able to sit with that, and perhaps now in the future recognize this is a phenomenon that is part of all of us, and we can all now that we know this, sit and live and be with that twilight sickness or whatever we want to call it.
Well, thank you for that. That's really interesting.
Thank you.
I didn't know that, what you were saying about.
And so when it comes to my wanting to visit someone who's convalescing or something, I tend to not go after 3 p.m. because there's that sense that I'll go in and they're not going to be there entirely. And it is for me, it's difficult to be there. It's kind of the same as Alzheimer's or something. You kind of want to be there when you know that they're going to be present, but you know there's a time when it's just a phenomenon. It is there. But thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yes, in the back.
I really appreciate listening to what you said also. In October, I moved to Lake County, and I lived in downtown Oakland for just the past few years. And it's an opportunity for me to reflect almost in the same schematic way about what it's like to come home in a 3-bedroom house. I'm the only one there, and sometimes I find myself pacing the floor. And being here in the Bay Area, there's a multitude of things to do. It's like, what am I going to do? I've got 5 things I want to do, and there's nothing to do. I look across the way, and there are horses. And what have you. So it really is a matter, and I was really appreciating that, because I do have those feelings of, what am I going to do? The feelings of being alone. I've got to come down to Oakland this weekend because I've been up there for a week, you know, and also, you know, growing up in New York, being an African-American man, living through the civil rights period, and living in Oakland, choosing to live in Oakland, I never in my life thought about living in Lake County.
Yeah.
And that was just not what a progressive African-American man does. You know, so I'm in this, and everything is foreign to me.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that I've been going through these stages, Kubler-Ross stages of grief. Before it was denial, now it's anger. Like, I'm here, I'm really here, and I don't want to be here. But in a sense I do, and having had a Buddhist practice and lived in a monastery for some time, this really gives me, and I knew that this is part of what I wanted to do. And so listening to your story kind of invites me to embrace this complete emptiness and the beauty of a very sparsely populated area. And so I get an opportunity to reflect on that through your speaking today. So I really appreciate listening to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your words too. You're being very courageous, and also I think what you just said about the contrast between life here and life there, whatever there is something I didn't mention. But we really do get distracted from our true selves, I think, when we're just constantly rushing from one thing to the next. And sometimes this emptiness and this nothing to do. I mean, at the basic, deepest level, there isn't anything to do, you know, at some level. So it's really good to return to that place now and then. Yeah. Yes?
Having visited a variety of solitary retreat centers in many different locations, what's impressed me, even in the desert or in the mountains or wherever I've been, how much life there is.
Yeah.
Enormous amounts of life. You know, how can you possibly be alone with all these bugs, even in the desert? There's scorpions and lichens, and you look at all of these things and you my God, what are they eating? You know, I immediately think of me.
What did they eat before I got here?
Not to mention, I did a silent retreat just last November, as a matter of fact. Several decades ago, somebody left the Sisters of St. Francis millions of dollars. This is in Aston, Pennsylvania. They put up something they call the Hermitage. 5 cottages that are just out of sight. It is the Ritz-Carlton.
Oh, wonderful.
And you can go there, and I asked Sister Jean, who runs it, I said, well, you know, are there limits to how long you can come here and stay like the rest of your life? And she said, no.
That's great.
So it's just all over the place. And even there, too, the forms of life, the bugs and the bees and the birds, as you say, they're just all over them. All over the place. And no insecticide. So
Yes, Jim.
Thank you. So did you find yourself talking to people?
Yes, I did, actually. And I was interested how much people were with me, actually. I brought people with me.
Pictures?
No, just in my head. Okay. I mean, but for example, I had these different kinds of green tea I like, and one morning I opened this gunpowder green tea, and I was making myself a cup, and I suddenly remembered, I thought of this man, Temple Smith, who works with me at the Buddhist Peace Fellowship, whose favorite kind of tea is gunpowder green tea. And Temple was right there with me. I said, "Hi, Temple!" And I had my tea. And so every once in a while, I mean, in that way, people were with me, and I talked to them. But I also talked to Satchmo at the bar quite a lot, and I talked to myself. And another thing I did, once a week, on Sundays actually, I had a day with no words. Because I'm a word person, I'm a writer, I'm an editor. I was doing a lot of writing while I was up there, and I was reading a lot. I was reading Dharma books and things. So I thought, okay, on Sundays, I'm going to try and just see if I can have a day without words, a day without language. And I'm not going to read, I'm not going to write, I'm not going to talk out loud, I'm not going to listen to any CDs, I'm not going to crank up the radio, and I'll just be in complete silence. And I'm not even going to talk to the dog. And it was just about impossible. It was a really good exercise because, I mean, I could not speak with my mouth, but I heard then that there were words going on in my mind all the time. I was constantly talking to myself saying, oh, I think it's time for a little bite of lunch. I mean, they were actually forming themselves into sentences, even though I wasn't saying them out loud. So, yes. Yes.
I have two experiences. I just had my knee replaced.
How is it?
It's amazingly well.
Good.
Thank you. In that experience, it's 6 weeks now. I went from total, complete, relying on other people, just remembering that I was there and coming and doing for me what needed to be done, to the time of being alone and nobody cares. Well, wait, you have to wait for someone to call you. You can't make things and so on. And it was a very mindful experience for me, experiencing this feeling where I am now with it, and this sense of being grateful. But it's like a two-edged sword for me. I'm incredibly grateful for the support I have from the universe. I'm almost guilty about the support I have from the universe. Thousands of dollars at Medicare, doctors paying $6,000, etc. I'm realizing that there are still how many children starving every day. And for people who don't have access to this now, just incredibly fortunate. It almost feels like not worthy of.
I think that's really an important point you bring up, because we really have to learn. I mean, there's no end of things to feel guilty about. Yeah, I felt guilty too, and then but I also am trying to practice with somehow allowing myself to experience joy and gratitude, and hold at the same time a knowledge of the suffering that's going on, just in a broader sense, and not let that take away my joy. I mean, what would be the point of that? Somehow, if the suffering that's already going on also takes away the little bit of joy that there is, that would be even worse. So somehow we need to learn, I think, as in our practice maybe, to allow ourselves to experience joy and experience gratitude, and let ourselves receive. It's hard to receive that, and at the same time not forget, the suffering. And that's a real hard practice. Yes.
Thank you so much for your talk. I really, really enjoyed it, and I support your position of sharing your own personal experience, because it's universal, and I got an enormous amount out of it. So thank you so much. The nearest experience I had to what you did is I went away specifically to Hawaii to do a 30-day water fast. So I only drank water and hang out with myself, and I actually succeeded.
Wow.
This happened, but the experience I had that maybe relates to some of your early stuff is I'd get to Molokai, which is pretty outback, and I'm on the East End, which is really outback, and there's like nobody around. And I speak in city terms, so I'm at least 3 blocks away from somebody. I mean, it's all trees, but 3 blocks away from somebody that I might do something with. And it's dark, and I'm in this tent by myself, and I expected to do this be there for half a year and do this fast for a month. And when it was dark, and I guess it must be something about the dark too, this incredible wave of terror went through me. I mean, like, God, I have no load, everything's going to eat me, I don't know what's going on, it was really terrible, terrible. And I thought, well, I guess I could do, just get up, scream my head off, flail my arms, and run to this person who's 3 blocks through the whatever away. But then what's that going to do for me? I'm just going to have to go home. Because I can't do this. And so I just sat there in the middle of this stream on this rock, and just this terror just like waved over me.
Wow. And
thankfully it went through me and then left. I mean, even just thinking about it, it shakes me. And what ended up happening, that was a wonderful thing, but in the time that I went through that experience, the amount of gratitude and connectedness and love and a certain kind of peace that I never had up to that point in my life all happened for me in this experience. It was a fantastic
that sounds amazing.
Experience. And hearing you speak, it inspires me to do something like what you're talking about. delighted that you did it, and it's a gift to me that you did it and came and spoke to us. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you. What part you did sounds pretty amazing.
Thank you.
It's time to stop. Yeah. Okay. I can hang around a little bit if people want to talk. Also, as we're hanging around, I brought a couple of copies of the last 2 copies I have, so I'm going to keep them. But there's a little book you might want to look at called One Moon on Shimon's Ridge, and it's got some pictures and words of photographs of my month. So.
Could we have announcements now?
Yes. I'm the host this morning, and to welcome all of you to GBF. We have some refreshment, and please also enjoy tea and each other's company. But if you use the teacups, please wash them and put them back on the rack above the sink. We also have a dinner ball up there. A suggested donation is $5 to $8, but whatever you can give will be gratefully accepted and received. And we also have sign-up sheet for newcomers and for people who would like to receive newsletters. So please write down your street address as well as email address so that we can stay in touch with you. And finally, there usually is a group of people who go out and have lunch together. So perhaps you can go out in front of the building around 12:30, and you'll probably see a group of people. So if that's where you should go and meet. And if you have any questions, feel free to come to me or to talk to anybody who seems to be coming to this group meeting for a long time. Thank you.
Thanks. Well,
there'll be a steering committee meeting today after we meet here, maybe about 12:30. And Susan, is the base group filled?
Well, not necessarily. I'm leading with another person. I'm leading a base group, which is a Buddhist Alliance for Social Engagement. It's through the Buddhist Peace Fellowship. And it's a group of people interested in exploring language and socially engaged Buddhism and working with writing for social change, other language arts for social change. It's a 6-month commitment, and we meet one evening a week, and we have one retreat a month. So it's a pretty intense experience. But if somebody wants to talk to me about it, you can mention it to me at the break.
Yes.
Just to plant the seed, the annual 5-night silent retreat, LGBT retreat at Spirit Rock for the lesbian and gay, bisexual, transgender Sangha is going to be happening the last week of April up at Spirit Rock, and it's a sliding scale, and they also have scholarships. And for those of you, many of us in this Sangha have been there over the years. It's a wonderful experience to deepen your practice and be with the gay Sangha. So you can check it out on spiritrock.org. I think it's like the 25th or 26th of April, something like that last week in April from Tuesday to Sunday.
Don?
As many of you have heard me say many times, I coordinate outreach to prisoners for the fellowship. And that involves responding to, at this point, this many letters, which we have received over the last month or so. It's become very helpful. There are several people who are very helpful in doing the work of just doing the responding for a year, Ron and Don. But we will have a meeting about 10, 15 minutes afterward. I'd like to have a little, what we call, mail opening party. Make a number of you come, sit with us, open up the mail, read the letters, get the feeling for what these people are. A lot of it's very prosaic, but it's not all together. So anyway, we have a mail letter opening party, what they call it, outside, about 4 after. It generally takes no more than 10 or 15 minutes, just processing this mail. I appreciate whoever can come and talk.
I just have a question. I know there was some talk at the beginning of the new year of a phone list going out, people who were willing to put their names on it. I just wondered if somebody knew the status was of that.
Yeah, I'm working sort of with Todd Pope on it, and he didn't print out the snail mail address in the data bank. So he said he would, so he's working on that. So
do you have a feel for when that would be available for the Sangha?
In a week or two is what I feel.
Okay.
Yeah, he'll bring it in the next time he comes, I guess.
Is Ty Pope here today?
No.
But the list that he did print out is there.
Yeah, there's a printout there now. It doesn't have
your name.
Yeah, it doesn't have your land address, your snail mail address on it.
Oh, there's a list available to take.
No, the list is available for correction.
To see if it's updated with your information, and to add your address. If it's because it won't be on there. But since it, I think we should actually, we put that out about a month ago. I think we should start it over again with the snail mail address and also some space too, because if you are providing a service for a living, let's say you're an electrician or a massage therapist, and you have a service you want to let the community know about, then you can put that on there too, with maybe a word or two describing it. It isn't meant to be an ad, but just, electrician specializing in lighting or massage therapist writing, whatever. So it's a little bit slow in the making, but please be patient and stay tuned. There might be another way of doing it that I'm going to talk to Tom about. It might be a little bit simpler. Okay.
Paul Albert.
Yeah, Steve Carson has had a major setback in his problems with one of his eyes, and he had major surgery this week, and he's going to be have a lengthy recovery. He has to lie with his head in a certain direction and so forth. And so I think we could send our thoughts and people might. I don't know if he's taking phone calls right now, but think about.
CJ.
We occasionally throw potlucks, GBF potlucks. The next one is scheduled on February 19th over at Todd's place. Anybody who would like to throw a potluck dinner, please contact me. I'm usually here every week.
CJ is our potluck coordinator. Bill.
Yeah, my name is Bill, and I'll be co-teaching a beginning meditation class that's starting at the end of January, a 5-week course on Vipassana meditation, mindfulness practice, meets the Unitarian Church. If you're interested, please come see me after we break. I can give you more information.
Yellow sweater.
I had breakfast this morning with Roger Corliss, and he said to let everybody know he's about halfway through with his chemotherapy. He's doing quite well. Although his energy is quite low, he didn't have the energy to come today. And he wanted to send everybody his love.
Thank you. David.
I just wanted to let everyone know that this retreat that's going on the 20th, 21st, and 22nd of January is really going to be a special event. And we have about 40 guys, many from this Sangha in the room, and from other Sanghas around and other practitioners. Just the last 2 days we've been planning with Howard King, who spoke here a couple of weeks ago, and a couple other people who practice Native American shamanism. And we're going to have a sweat lodge and a drumming circle journeying group paralleling the Buddha's journey of awakening. So it should be, other than that, a silent meditation retreat. So.
Where can we get information about?
We talk to me, and today would be about the day to do it if you want, or if you need to look at your calendar maybe tomorrow, but we're kind of closing
Are you putting out something written about when and where?
I don't have anything written with me, but I can send you an email of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't do attachments very well.
Oh,
George. And a reminder that our talks are available on the internet at the GBF website, gaybuddhist.org.
Susan, at this point, we usually stand in a circle and hold hands. Could you do the offering of merit?
Wait, Carl has a...
I just want to make two comments. One, I've done Bill Weber's class and I highly endorse it. And to you, Susan, I don't know if anybody else here saw it, but I saw The Gay Man and I love it.
Okay.
I want to say one thing. Bill Weber's going to be giving a Dharma talk at the retreat, so...
May we all share in the gratitude we feel for the precious opportunity of human birth and the gratitude we feel for our time together this morning. And may the merit of our time together and our thoughts go to the liberation of all suffering beings everywhere.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.